Hello, lovers of the world. This is Cinta speaking. I love listening to new music. I really love trying to find new things to obsess over, whether that's a new album, a new artist, a new song. And I'm always trying to chase that sense of joy and triumph of discovering something new to love. It's the beginning of the month, so it's once again time to reflect and rank every album and EP that I listened to in the last month in a tier list. I'll explain the tier list in case we have some new watchers in the audience, but if you're familiar with the tier list, you are welcome to skip ahead. First, we have year-end list material, the highest tier. This tier is specifically for releases that came out in 2023. This is a way for me to keep track of new projects and to remind myself to look back on these releases when the time comes at the end of the year. Only 2023 releases are allowed in this tier list because those are the only releases and projects that I will consider for that list. The albums in this tier are albums that I really like and feel like have some longevity. Ideally, maybe I will find one or two albums to put in this tier list at the end of every month for the end of the year, but if I can't find anything, then that's just how it is. The tier below that, the second highest tier in the tier list, is called French Toast. So this is the highest an album can be if that album was not released in 2023. But this tier also houses albums that even though I enjoyed, I don't think or feel I would consider for the end of year list. However, if that album was released in this year or was placed in any year, any tier below year-end list material, they still do have a chance of moving up to year-end list material if I end up changing my mind throughout the year. The tier that I consider to be the average tier is called Gems Found in the Mind. So these are albums where you have to dig a little bit deeper in, but you'll be rewarded for your time. Because these are projects that I feel have some tracks that I really enjoy or have stood out to me, or they are EPs that overall work well as a project, but they just didn't really stand out to me. So just things that I think were perfectly average. And then the second lowest tier in the tier list is called Well, I Learned Something New. So I'm always down for expanding my horizons, and I do like to stay updated with new releases, but if that album doesn't really hit personally, then that's just that. I'm putting this in that tier list. And the lowest tier for this tier list is called The Eggs You Break for Your French Toast. So it's obviously a reference to the second highest tier. It's a more positive way of saying that I didn't like the album, but at least I gave it a shot. Because in your search for great music, you will come across stuff that doesn't really resonate as much, and that's okay, because you have to break a few eggs to make a French toast, right? And I always hesitate to call an album bad because I find that when it comes to your musical tastes, the things that you dislike about that album are going to be the reasons why somebody else would love that album. As a disclaimer, just because I put anything in this tier list or in the Well, I Learned Something New tier list, that doesn't mean that I dislike the artist overall. I'm just grading that particular release. With that out of the way, let's get to ranking the stuff. As you can see, we're back on the same tier list, but with new additions to rank. I do want to keep all the previous things that I've ranked in the same list so that I can kind of compare everything that I will rank in the future from this point onwards, if that makes sense, because everything is relative, especially in regards to your own musical taste. If you do want to check out what I listened to in January and the thoughts that followed after it, you are welcome to check that out after you watch this video. Okay, let's get to ranking. Okay, first I listened to Joy by Wu Ah. This is an EP that was released in June 9, 2022, and I'm actually going to put that in B tier. This was mostly forgettable, but it was still a pleasant experience listening to it. I actually really hated the title track when I first listened to it, but after a few tries, it kind of grew on me a little. Not so much that I would put it in my heavy rotation, but just enough that I am a little bit kinder to it than I was the first time I listened to it. The rest of the B-sides are okay, but I just haven't gotten back and listened to it that much. Then I listened to Hello World by Extraordinary Heroes. This is an album that was released in July 2022. The members are really incredible vocalists, but I feel like that their music doesn't really do anything for me. I can applaud their creativity and originality because I can definitely say that I've never heard anything like this before. So I'm open to keeping up with their music in the future just because I really like them as singers and I love their covers too. But I'm mostly looking to see whether their music has improved or if my tastes have changed to align with theirs. But I'm not exactly like looking forward to do so, you know. As such, I'm putting them in D tier with the hopes that they move up in the ranks somehow. And then I listened to Very Us by Viviz. This is an EP that was released in January 31, 2023, and I'm putting that in French Toast. I'm very impressed with this EP. I kind of see Viviz as still in a bit of a transitional period. The B-sides of their first EP tapped into G-Friend's classic signature sound, whereas their last comeback with Love Aid was a bit too summer focused to claim that there was any indication of a permanent signature sound, if that makes sense. Like, obviously, that sound was just something that they were doing for a summer comeback, not necessarily for something that they want to keep doing consistently over the rest of their careers. But this third comeback does have the makings of a possible permanent musical style. I also really appreciate that it is a decently long EP, which I appreciate in K-pop. The title track, Pull Up, isn't really for me, but I can appreciate that it follows well with their debut song Bop Bop. Fun, upbeat song, but it's still mature and sassy, and the girls are able to sell it really well. As for the rest of the EP, I personally enjoyed the latter half of it compared to the first. I really like Vanilla Sugar Killer, Overdrive, and So Special, so much that they ended up in my heavy rotation. So overall, I do want to give them props for producing a well-constructed EP. So it is going in French Toast. And then I listened to Sting by Emma Rosa. So this is an album that was released in January 27, 2023. I'm putting that in year-end list material. The first time I listened to this album, I really got like a full rush of euphoria. I think it's just because it's a kind of pop rock music that I really like. It's fun, it's got interesting instrumentation. It's not too basic, but basic enough that you can kind of enjoy it anywhere you go. That makes sense. It's catchy, it's fun, and it lifts my mood up whenever I listen to it. So I'm putting that there. And then I listened to After the Magic by Paranol. This is an album that was released in January 28, 2023. Paranol is an underground South Korean musician that has gained popularity in the indie, post-rock, shoegaze scene following his debut album in 2021 and his subsequent collaborations with other shoegaze and post-rock artists over the past couple of years. This is his new album and it completely destroyed me. The first night I listened to this, I like cried 3 times and I couldn't sleep the entire night. I fell asleep at like 7 a.m. It was just so affecting. This is like the power of music for real. It's just a very hopeful album compared to everything that he's ever put out so far. If you've been following me for a while, you'll know that I really loved his first album, To See the Next Part of the Dream. It's like one of my favorite albums ever. The person that he was in To See the Next Part of the Dream has changed a lot since he made After the Magic, you know? After the Magic is just a lot more hopeful. The absolute whiplash of hearing the track Imagination for the first time, I deadass thought I accidentally queued up a song from a completely different artist, and I had to double check to see like, oh, this is still the same album. I didn't accidentally like listen to somebody new. And so it's really interesting to compare it to like his previous works where everything was definitely a lot like more pained and angst ridden, whereas After the Magic has a lighter, airier feel to it because of the inclusion, I think, of the wind instruments that kind of lifts up the instrumentation even when the crashing cacophony overwhelms the listener. And also he's tapping into some what I thought were maximalist electronica vibes, like the song Sketchbook kind of has really interesting textures because of his use of that. Not only is After the Magic a reflection of his growth as a person, but also his growth as a musician as he's learned to collaborate with other musicians, right? Like Asian Glow, Delazir, who is I think is in this album herself. So Delazir is another South Korean shoegaze emo artist that started off in Bandcamp as well. Her vocals in this album really elevates the tracks to a completely different mood because of the real contrast between her voice and Paranol's. So her voice is like, you know, really pretty and delicate and very feminine, you know, like you listen to it, you're like, yeah. Whereas in comparison to Paranol's like really guttural singing voice, it sounds like he's in a lot of pain when he's singing, but he cannot stop singing because staying silent hurts him even more. The artistry! Anyway. So yeah, this album being released in the first month of the year is really sweet for me because I feel like it's an album that will accompany me throughout the year, and not just through the year but like throughout life. It's so dense and overwhelming that everything outside of the bubble that it creates just really helps to ease and elevate so much of the fear and anxiety that stems from living in our modern daily life. Anyway, moving on. Then I listened to 8 Turn Rise by 8 Turn. This is an EP that was released in January 30, 2023. So 8 Turn is a new boy group from MNH Entertainment, which was the company that had previously housed Chungha before she left, and Bandit, the girl group, before they had disbanded. Tic Tac is an intriguing title track, but I'm not completely enamored or sold on it. I can appreciate it for what it is, and I can see why somebody else would stand immediately, but it's not really for me. And same goes for the rest of the EP. I didn't really find it too memorable. I did find that it was an adequate start for a newly debuted group. They do have a style and a direction that they devote themselves to, which I really respect, but that style is just not for me. There is a lot of potential for the fans to enjoy, but as I said, I'm not entirely sold on it. I already have a bit of a bias against boy groups in general because I'm just not like that impressed by them in any way usually, so I wouldn't take it too personally. I do have a favorite track, which is Heartache, which is a bit of a 2016 era EDM pop style revivalism. And then I listened to Nisemono by Ginger Root. So this was an EP that was released in September 9, 2022. I'm putting this in Gems Found in the Mind. I feel like I listen to an album and then I get the feeling that I'm listening to it at the wrong time, because sometimes when you listen to music it really is all about time. Something that you listen to at the wrong time when you're not in the mood for it can definitely affect how you feel about that album, right? And so I felt like when I listened to this, I listened to it at the wrong time. And so I'm probably going to revisit this some other day because it has all the makings of something I would love, but it didn't leave that much of an impact on me. And so I put that in Gems Found in the Mind because the actual listening experience of it was still pleasant, but the fact that none of the tracks stood out to me was kind of like, you know. And then I listened to Let Her Burn by Rebecca Black. This is an album that was released in February 9. This is her debut album, but she's released a lot of hyperpop tracks prior to this, and I don't know if cathartic is the right word, but like it feels really like special for me because I've been following her since Rebecca Black released her single Personal back in 2021, and I kept crossing my fingers that she would continue going down the hyperpop route because I felt like that was the style that she like really shone in. And cut to 2 years later, she releases a great album full of great hyperpop tracks. And so I'm putting this in French Toast. Part of the reason why I'm so overjoyed with this album, I think, is because it kind of listening to this album kind of reminds me of when I had first listened to Charlie XCX's Charlie and Rina Sawayama's Sawayama. It's that feeling of realizing that an artist that you love has kind of entered the stage and is gaining the commercial success that they deserve and is being well received by lots of different people. My personal standout songs are Destroy Me, Sick to My Stomach, and Crumbs, but I also really like how the album ends with Performer as the final track. I think it's a really sincere way to end her first album, like a love letter to the way that she loves to sing, the way that she has grown from being a laughingstock to like a performer, and how she's always wanted to be a star. And then I listened to Our Extended Play by Bia Badubi. This is an EP that was released in June 24, 2021. I'm putting this in Gems Found in the Mind because it's a decent EP, but it's not very memorable as an actual body of work. I think it's because it might be a little too short, but it does make sense considering that this EP was released in between two full-length albums, so it's more understandable to think of this EP as like a bit of a transitional period between like literally two bigger projects. I really like He Gets Me High. That's my favorite track of the EP. I think it's a fun, catchy song, and it's a pleasant surprise to hear Maddie Healy's voice singing alongside hers. I didn't realize that he was gonna be on the track, and so when he started singing, I was like, oh my god, it's him. Then I listened to Desire I Want to Turn Into You by Carolyn Polachek, and this was released in February 14, 2023, aka Valentine's Day. This belongs in your endless material for sure. I only listened to one pre-release single prior to hearing the entire album. That was Bunny as a Writer. So a lot of the tracks in this album are a complete surprise to me, and I'm so glad that I decided to wait until everything was released before cracking down into it, because hearing everything for the first time as a project is so incredible. So first of all, the first track, Welcome to My Island, is deadass one of my favorite songs of the year. I actually listened to this on the plane to Australia, so not only did the lyrics hit hard while I was flying over the ocean, it also just hits hard in general, to the point where I listened to this track so many times that I would keep procrastinating listening to the entire album. Like I'd be like, okay, let's start listening to this album, and I would start with Welcome to My Island, and I would just keep that on repeat on loop, and then I would not go further on because of how much I really love the song. I really love the hook, Desire, I wanna turn into you, and I love the way she talks about floating on the ocean blue and the palm trees swaying in the wind. It's very evocative of an aesthetic that I'm about to basically land into. It's basically like Gold Coast, you know? So it really fit the mood of where I was at that time of my life. So yeah, it feels really cathartic also to hear Polachek's siren-like wailings. I really love her willingness to be vocally interesting and out of the box, because she knows that she can go for it, you know? Like if she starts screaming, she knows that she sounds good when she's doing it, and I love that. Hearing her sing is so cathartic because it makes you want to scream, but she's also doing it for you. So in a way, she becomes your voice. I don't know, that's just how I feel. I love this album. Another standout track to me is Fly to You featuring Grimes and Dido. Grimes, Side Eye. This track is incredible though, because I think each person's voice is contributing exactly what they need to contribute. So Grimes has like a high pitched, kind of almost, I don't even know how to describe it, but like a cutesy voice, and it kind of really goes well with the drum and bass that she's adding into the track. But then these really warm guitar strings cut through that sound so cleanly and precisely, and so I feel like it creates this wonderful contrast between this machine made like drumming, like drum and bass, and the organicness of an acoustic instrument, the guitar. And that guitar is also a little bit represented also by Dido's singing voice, who I don't really know a lot about, but this is a great introduction to her. I think she just like these three people like slay so hard, so effortlessly, flawlessly, individually, and collectively. This is such a great song. Other songs that I really enjoy are Billions, Blood and Butter, and Bunny as a Rider. But honestly, the entire album is incredible. Like I love this album. Okay, that's enough. Then I listened to Love Never Dies by TNX. So this was released in February 15, 2023. TNX is a rookie boy group from P Nation that debuted in 2022, and this is their latest comeback. Honestly, I'm actually a pretty big fan of this EP. I don't think I even listened to their debut song, but I really like this EP, and so I'm putting this in A tier. I really like the title track. For some reason, I'm really surprised that I'm really into it, because it's an emo rap song that, again, isn't really my typical genre. As the title track, I thought that this was promoted in a really interesting way, because they've asked a bunch of other artists to do remixes of this song, and I'll probably talk about that some other time. But I really like this title track. I don't know why, but my standout favorite is probably Wasn't Ready. I don't know why, it just hits. It's like a super typical like trappy, auto-tune to hell, stylistically auto-tune to hell song, but it just hits. I don't know. I also really like I Need You. It's just like a basic R&B, but like they do it really well. And even Slingshot, which is like, what is this? I think it comes across as a really random track to include in the EP, because it's very trap, and also aggressive, and the autotune is a lot more dialed up in the song. So I feel like it's a really aggressive way to end the EP, but also in a way it makes sense for the story that they've built up to this point, because the rest of the EP had been developing this angst, this sadness throughout the project, and this song is just like the climax of that angst, where this angst that was persistent throughout the songs becomes anger now. And then I listened to Cabin Fever by Purple Kiss. This was released in February 18, 2023. And honestly, it was okay. I'm putting this in A tier because I thought the album was good. The title track, Sweet Juice, isn't for me, but I can appreciate it as a very logical result of the musical progression that Purple Kiss has kind of been going through. I personally enjoy the last three tracks the most. They are all so distinctly different to each other, but it still makes sense for me at least. Autopilot is like another Blinding Lights knockoff that I really, really should be sick of by now with how often I've heard it so much, but I'm not. And I still like it for some reason. Agate is just a nice summer pop song that you might hear in the background of, I don't know, an H&M or something, but not in a bad way. It's just like basic but pleasant, you know? And So Far So Good is your run-of-the-mill, feel-good R&B trap song, which I still like, and I thought was like a nice way to end off the EP. So yeah, I'm putting this in French Toast. Then I listened to Assemble by Triple S. This EP was released in February 13, 2023, and I'm actually going to put this in French Toast as well. So the title track, Rising, doesn't elicit as much joy as Generation did. Generation was like peak K-pop, but it's still okay, and I guess they kind of had to find a song and a sound that fit a lot more members, right? Because this Generation had 4, whereas this one I think had 11, and so obviously the dynamics and the logistics of having 11 members is going to affect the actual song that they end up giving them later on. But I think I enjoy this album a little bit more than their first EP, only because I actually don't remember how the first EP went. But I think this one, I like this album a little bit more because of Jaden Jong's and Monotree's producing styles. They used to produce for Luna, and that's why I get a lot of like Luna vibes from the B-sides, because before they worked with Triple S, they worked with Luna before they got kicked out by BBC, I think. I don't know what the history is behind that, but I kind of see the B-sides of this album as something that we could have had if they didn't leave Luna. Anyway, the last thing I listened to was Be Awake by The Boys. This was released in February 2023, and I'm also putting this in French Toast. Man, these K-pop EPs are doing something for me for once. So the title track, Roar, is really intriguing. I don't really have too much to say about this right now, probably because I haven't had enough time to digest the EP itself, but I like it enough to put it in French Toast. A pet peeve of mine when it comes to K-pop albums is when they order their tracks in a way that the rest of the listening experience a bit of a whiplash. So like, for example, they'll have a song, Savior to Horizon, and then Horizon to Diamond Life is a bit of it's like a complete whiplash. That's something that's always been a pet peeve of mine, but I think I can forgive them for this because I think they did their best with the tracks that they were given, if that makes sense. Awake and Roar are next to each other, and then Blah Blah and Savior are next to each other. Then you have Horizon, and then Diamond Life is at the end. It's almost like as a way to bookend the rest of the thing, so you can kind of like listen to the top again because it's the same sound as the beginning of the album. So in a way, you can kind of like loop it over and over. That's the only reason I could see why they would put Diamond Life at the very end in the way that they did. If that's the case, I can respect that for them. I think that still shows that they're thinking about the overall album experience, not just like haphazardly chucking tracks all willy-nilly. I still like the EP, and that's pretty much it. Wow. Let's see the stats for this month. So in total, I listened to 14 albums and EPs, and then here is a pie chart of the listening experience of the year so far. Please feel free to subscribe if you don't want to miss out on my next monthly music review next month. I post every week on Fridays, or at least I try to. All my social media links are down in the description if you guys want to follow me in there, alongside my Patreon and Coffee pages if you want to support my work. I'm gonna try to use Patreon a little bit more, but I still haven't figured out how. Anyway, thank you so much for being on this musical journey with me. I'll see you guys next time.